On Saturday, May 19th, 2018, Jimmy Buffett, singer-songwriter turned author, actor, and businessman, kicked off Son of a Sailor 2018 at the Sprint Center in Kansas City, Missouri. A tour not only named after one of his classic songs, but also to celebrate the 40-year anniversary of the 1978 Platinum album. The LP includes other recognizable tunes, such as the radio-friendly remake of Livingston's Saturday Night, which first appeared in a far raunchier form on the soundtrack to Frank Perry's 1975 contemporary Western comedy Rancho Deluxe starring Jeff Bridges, Mañana, which peaked 84 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100, and of course, However, 2018 also marks the 40-year anniversary of another Buffett album that didn't peak as high as Son of a Sailor and only went gold. But it was this underrated release that introduced casual listeners to a whole other experience of Jimmy Buffett songs.
As the son of a sailor, I went out on the sea for adventure. Spanning the view were the captain and crew, like a man just released from indenture. As a dreamer of dreams and a traveling man, I have chalked up many of my...
Hey Parrot Heads, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. If you're watching this, chances are we have similar taste in music, so you're going to want to click that alert button to get notified when more content like this gets posted. Also, if you're into literature, particularly the horror, suspense, and thriller genres, go ahead and check out my website, www.cwschultz.com, where you can get to know a little more about me, as well as browse my bibliography of published novels. Views, subscribes, and likes allow me to keep posting content about music and writing stories, so your viewership and readership are always appreciated. Now, enough with the shameless self-promotion. Let's get back to the program. The live double album takes its title from the liner notes written by Buffett, which details a few of the adventures he and the Coral Reefer Band had while out on the road. The notes conclude with this paragraph: "I could go on for hours telling stories, but I guess you had to be there." Recorded in Atlanta and Miami in August 1978 during the Cheeseburger in Paradise tour, which was capitalizing on the hit single's success, Buffett had many stories before and would have many more stories to follow, but it was You Had to Be There that would preserve itself as the first chapter of Jimmy Buffett the Entertainer, who, even more than 30 years after his first live album, would be ranked as one of the top touring artists of the decade according to Billboard, amongst Rolling Stones, U2, and even Madonna. By the end of the 1970s and into the early 80s, Buffett's fan base grew as word of his concerts spread, and his catalog expanded with sing-alongs like Volcano, Fins, Boat Drinks, One Particular Harbor, and the Van Morrison cover, Brown Eyed Girl.
Days when the rains came.
During a 1985 concert at Cincinnati's Timberwolf Amphitheater, the comparison to Grateful Dead fandom was observed by Buffett himself, and a Coral Reeferer, Timothy B. Schmidt, coined the term Parrot Heads. This embracement from fans would pull Buffett's ship through many different musical waters per se, but You Had to Be There would always act as the anchor of what made him such a renowned performer.
That is all I really want to say. I was thrown out of Atlanta yesterday. Yeah, we all sat in the balcony down in Miami, went and saw Animal House last week. So, yeah, gotta go see that movie now. I gotta give Blucci a plug. That's a hot movie. You'll all like it.
Or going as far as teasing those who were interrupting the show with song demands.
Look, I'm in charge here. We're gonna run this goddamn thing, right? Now, this is my ship. we're going to do that a little later, but, you know, see, a lot of people want to come and hear one song. It's like planted in their mind no matter what song it is. And they go, they're waiting for that one song, you know. We got about 9 million albums and many songs, so we can only do them one at a time. You know, this is not your 8-track. I don't want to hear that shit in the middle of that album. I want to hear that one song. Now, when are you going to play it?
You Had to Be There was the first to capture this interactive, rowdy, fun experience of Jimmy Buffett music. And over a dozen live albums later, that freshness and enthusiasm hasn't been recaptured on any of his live albums since, with even some releases, like Live in Anguilla, crossfading during the applause in order to edit out the dialogue in between songs. While live albums like 1990's Feeding Frenzy and 1999's Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, or even the 1985 video, Live by the Bay, did indeed capture some great musical performances, it was You Had to Be There that actually depicted the Jimmy Buffett concert experience. Perhaps one of the things that makes this album so distinguishable from the many that would follow is the unique period of Buffett's life. His career couldn't ask for much else, except maybe more songs as successful as Margaritaville. But Margaritaville would be enough, as people were packing in venues as he began to headline more and more shows. It appeared Buffett was living the high life. However, being a hopeless workaholic, Buffett would be performing much of his 1978 tour in excruciating pain. Earlier that year, while playing a softball game against the White House League, he broke his ankle in 2 different places. Nothing gets Jimmy down, and he was adamant about continuing the Cheeseburger in Paradise tour, immobile, and popping painkillers throughout the performance. The album and shows during the Cheeseburger in Paradise tour would open with Son of a Sailor, the title cut of the tour's promotional album. At the start of the tour, Son of a Sailor's performance would sound very similar to the studio version, but by the tour's end, the song turned much heavier and upbeat, which would get the show up and running quickly, as heard on You Had to Be There. From there, both the album and the actual show would move into a rock and roll version of Pencil Thin Mustache, a staple during the 70s and early 80s. Then the show would settle just a tad for Wonder Why We Ever Go Home, before immediately segueing into the smashing Landfall, a pair of songs both appearing on Buffett's last album, Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes, from 1977. Changes in Latitudes had peaked number 2 on the Billboard's top country albums, and would eventually go platinum, thanks mainly to its inclusion of Margaritaville, as well as its title cut gaining some minor airplay. Because of this, songs from Changes in Latitudes were recognizable in concert during the late 70s, and Buffett would keep this smooth transition between Wonder Why We Ever Go Home and Landfall in the setlist all the way through the 1980 Hot Dog and Road Map tour. Tracks 5 and 6, however, is where we begin to diverge from any old regular performance to the individuality each show was capable of having. At this point of the show during the Cheeseburger in Paradise tour, Buffett would usually play something like Mañana and Livingston Saturday Night, both of which were peaking singles at the time. Instead, You Had to Be There shifts these slots with Miss You So Badly, the B-side of Margaritaville, and Havana Daydreamin', the title cut from his 1976 album. While this change may just be a preference in song choice during those recordings, it might also be the result of other things. Longtime ABC MCA producer Norbert Putnam likely thought it'd be safer to exclude Mañana and Livingston Saturday Night, because having 2 versions in circulations while the songs were still active singles could cause interference in their chart position if the studio and live versions were competing with each other. This could explain why no other songs from Son of a Sailor appear on You Had to Be There, besides the title track itself. This would also explain why, despite its popularity, Buffett and Putnam chose to never officially release the song Son of a Sailor as a single. Other songs Buffett was playing from the Son of a Sailor album during that time was also excluded from You Had to Be There, such as The Last Line and Coast of Marseilles, both penned by Keith Sykes, who would go on to co-write Volcano, as well as Fool Button, Cowboy in the Jungle, and Cheeseburger in Paradise. Cheeseburger excluded? Yes. Cheeseburger in Paradise, one of Buffett's most popular songs, and the namesake of the tour this live album was recorded for, was cut from You Had to Be There. This brings us to another reason You Had to Be There has withstood the hands of time. It's not necessarily timeless per se. In fact, it could be considered dated because there is no way you could go to a concert nowadays without hearing Cheeseburger in Paradise, or even Fins in Volcano. This album actually captures a type of Jimmy Buffett concert that doesn't exist anymore. You Had to Be There presents itself like a single show, despite being recorded over several nights. From its introductions at the beginning of the album, to its drawn-out applause as the band leaves the stage after Dixie Diner. The only fading between songs is when the sides of the two records start and end, as opposed to some live albums that interrupt the flow by indiscreetly fading in and out in the middle of the record, such as Queen's Live Killers, or even recent live albums like Summer Gods by Third Eye Blind. Here, You Had to Be There attempts to cut between shows as unnoticeably as possible. For the most part, the mixing works. However, there's one part between Margaritaville and Changes in Latitudes where the cut is pretty obvious. This particular edit indicates where the acoustic set had been skipped over. After Margaritaville, Buffett would play acoustically before bringing the band back for introductions and Why Don't We Get Drunk. While You Had to Be There cut all the way past this and picked up where Changes in Latitudes and Come Monday were played, the acoustic set would be inserted into side A of record 2. This is when You Had to Be There separates itself from successive live releases, in which Buffett focuses less on the music and more on the background of how these stories turned into songs. He would go on to talk about how he learned Lord Buckley's God's Own Drunk, or the people that inspired such ballads as He Went to Paris and The Captain and the Kid, as well as the motivation behind Grapefruit Juicy Fruit, an introduction that took longer to tell than the actual song itself. The final quarter of the album includes Why Don't We Get Drunk, the only release that makes sure to include the "and screw" in the title, as well as A Pirate Looks at 40. Tampico Trauma would follow as the concluding song of the main set before Buffett and the Coral Reefer Band would return for the closing tracks, Morris's Nightmare and Dixie Diner, as encores. The former was one of two brand new songs appearing on You Had to Be There, the other being Perrier Blues, and were never recorded in the studio, either in favor of different songs being more fitting for subsequent albums, or as an additional selling point for You Had to Be There, as this album remains the only places to find both of these songs. You Had to Be There ends with Dixie Diner, an instrumental first recorded by Larry Raspberry and the High Steppers, a band that Coral Reefer Greg Fingers Taylor was a part of. You Had to Be There was released in October 1978, with Come Monday being the only track that needed vocal overdubbing. Albums and live albums would continue to be released over the years, but You Had to Be There remained one of a kind. You can say it was the chemistry of the Coral Reefer lineup at the time, or the song selection, or even Buffett's broken leg, the pain of which dosed the recordings with drug references and bantering. Though, perhaps it's a combination of all of these things that lead fans to still praise You Had to Be There, even 40 years after its release. At its core, Jimmy Buffett is a storyteller, and that's apparent not only in his #1 best-selling books like Tales from Margaritaville, Where's Joe Merchant, and his autobiography, A Pirate Looks at 50, but also in his lyrics. While You Had to Be There captures Buffett's storytelling impulses in between nearly each of the 19 songs, The album is a story in and of itself. Not quite like a concept album, as Buffett begins the liner notes of Escape to Margaritaville with, "To me, an album was simply a collection of songs that I had written within a certain period of time." You Had to Be There's story is more in relation to distinctively capturing a style, mood, and even enthusiasm. In another 40 years from now, who knows what the newer generation of Parrot Heads will think of You Had to Be There, the earliest record to capture what it was like to experience Jimmy Buffett music live. While they may never experience a Jimmy Buffett concert, they'll have parents, grandparents, and even great-grandparents who raised them on these songs, and they'll realize that it was more than just music. It was a lifestyle, in some ways a philosophy. It wasn't just about hearing songs you like. It was being there and experiencing it. You had to be at a Jimmy Buffett show to understand its magic. But you had to be there is the next best thing.